The Red Sea shimmered beneath the rising sun, its calm surface betraying the tension brewing far above. From the deck of the USS Eisenhower, one of the U.S. Navy's most powerful aircraft carriers, a sleek $60 million fighter jet roared into the sky. It was an FA-18 Super Hornet, fast, lethal, and on edge. The pilot, Lieutenant Commander Jason "Hawk" Merritt, had flown dozens of combat sorties across the Middle East. But today felt different. Before launch, there'd been a briefing that ran longer than usual. Satellite images showed increased Houthi movement along Yemen's western coastline, armed convoys, hidden radar stations, and rumors, still unconfirmed, of advanced surface-to-air systems, likely smuggled in from Iran. For months, the Houthis had targeted commercial ships in the Red Sea. Now U.S. forces were preparing to hit back harder. Patrols were intensified. Airspace was hostile. Every takeoff came with the possibility it might be your last. Inside the cramped cockpit, Hawk adjusted his oxygen mask and scanned his instruments. Everything was normal. Engine temps steady, radar clean. His co-pilot, Lieutenant Marcus "Flash" DeWitt, was silent, a sign he, too, was watching for anything out of place. "We'll make a loop along Sector 3, Hawk said, toggling to a new waypoint on the HUD. "Copy that," Flash replied. "Looks quiet. Too quiet." Hawk smirked. Flash always said that. But the truth was they both knew silence in this part of the world could be deadly. Beneath them, unseen by the naked eye, ran one of the world's busiest shipping lanes. Oil tankers, cargo ships, naval destroyers, they all passed through this maritime artery. And now, rebel eyes were tracking them. 15 minutes into their patrol, the tension began to ebb. The mission felt routine, even dull. Hawk eased the stick slightly, leveling the aircraft. The horizon was a perfect, uninterrupted line until it wasn't. A sharp beep jolted both men. The radar lit up, faint but unmistakable. "You seeing that?" Flash asked, already flipping defensive switches. "Yeah. Bogey at 5 o'clock. Low altitude. No transponder. Could be a drone. Could be a bird. Could be something worse." Hawk banked hard to the left, trying to outflank whatever was creeping up behind them. The blip vanished, then reappeared. Closer. "Deploy countermeasures," Hawk ordered. Flares hissed from the Super Hornet's fuselage, falling like burning embers into the sky. Suddenly, the warning klaxon screamed. "Missile launch! Repeat! We have a launch!" Flash shouted. Hawk's heart slammed into his ribs. Somewhere on the coast, someone had locked onto them and fired. He yanked the stick back, climbing sharply. G-forces pressed him into the seat. The sea spun below like a whirlpool. "Chaff deployed," Flash said. But it wasn't enough. A deafening thud shook the jet, followed by a cascade of flashing alerts. The right engine sputtered, then died. Hydraulic pressure dropped. Lights flickered in the cockpit like a haunted arcade. "We've been hit! Engine 2 is out!" Hawk yelled, fighting the controls. The aircraft lurched sideways. Smoke filled the cabin. Something below was on fire. "Shut it down! Eject protocol green!" Flash shouted. Number not yet. Hawk gritted his teeth. If he could keep her steady, maybe, just maybe, he could guide the bird back toward the carrier. But the ocean was rising fast. Below, aboard the USS Eisenhower, alarm klaxons echoed across the flight deck. Officers scrambled. Radar techs tracked the descending Super Hornet, its altitude bleeding away like a dying heartbeat. Back in the cockpit, Hawk made a final decision. Punching out in 3, 2. Both seats launched upward, catapulting the pilots into the thin morning air. Parachutes deployed seconds before they splashed down into the cold, unforgiving Red Sea. Floating in the water, Hawk looked up to see his jet, a marvel of American engineering, spiral down and crash into the waves with a monstrous splash. A $60 million weapon gone in a flash. Rescue helicopters launched instantly. Within minutes, divers pulled the shaken pilots from the sea. But the questions were only beginning. Who fired the missile? How did they know where to aim? And most chilling of all, was this just the beginning? Back on deck, soaked and exhausted, Hawk sat wrapped in a thermal blanket. His mind replayed the moment over and over, the missile, the impact, the fall. It wasn't just a patrol gone wrong. It felt like a trap. As technicians worked to piece together what little remained of the aircraft, the sky above the Red Sea remained deceptively calm. But war had changed. The enemy had teeth, and the United States had just lost a fighter jet over hostile waters. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was preparation. Because somewhere in Yemen, someone was already celebrating, and somewhere on that same coast, others were loading the next missile. In the command center aboard the USS Eisenhower, the atmosphere was tense, humming with controlled urgency. Rear Admiral Thomas Raines, a seasoned officer with 30 years of experience and salt gray hair to match, stood over a glowing operations map, eyes locked on the blinking red indicator where Hawk's jet had disappeared from radar. He didn't need confirmation. The crash report was already in. What he wanted now were answers. Across from him, Lieutenant Commander Sophia Patel, an intelligence analyst from Naval Intelligence Command, quickly fed new data into the system. "We've confirmed it wasn't a heat-seeking manpad," she said. "Telemetry suggests a radar-guided missile, likely Russian-made SA-6 or its Iranian variant." Raines's brow tightened. "I thought we knocked out all the coastal SAM sites in that sector last month." "So did CENTCOM," Patel replied, "but this one was mobile, and it wasn't even supposed to be there." That caught the Admiral's attention. She turned her tablet toward him. A blurry drone image showed a camouflaged launcher hidden in the hills near the Al-Muka coastline. Next to it were crates, faintly marked in Farsi. "Iran," Raines muttered. "Again." "Likely smuggled through Hodeidah," Patel added. "Our analysts believe the platform was covertly moved in last week." Down in the ship's medical bay, Hawk and Flash were recovering. Neither was physically hurt, aside from bruises and a few scrapes, but their expressions were hollow. Hawk, normally brash and calm, stared silently at the ceiling. It wasn't just the crash, it was the feeling he couldn't shake, that something about this mission had been off from the start. "I had no lock warnings," he muttered. "It just came out of nowhere." Flash, seated beside him, nodded. "Like they knew we'd be there. Like they were waiting for us." Later that evening, Raines paid them a visit. The Admiral rarely came down personally after an incident, but this wasn't routine. The stakes were changing fast. "You both did everything right," he said. "There's nothing you could have done differently, and we're damn lucky you're still breathing." Hawk gave a tight nod but said nothing. "We're investigating. If this was an ambush, and we believe it was, we'll find out how they got that information." Raines left them with that promise, but the truth weighed heavy. If Houthi rebels had intel on U.S. flight routes, it meant one of two things. Their surveillance capabilities were far more advanced than estimated, or someone was feeding them data. Back in Washington, the Pentagon held an emergency briefing. Defense Secretary Langston paced before the National Security Council, frustration evident in her voice. "This was no random missile strike. We have every reason to believe Iran is escalating, arming Houthis with systems capable of bringing down frontline aircraft." The room was quiet. No one doubted Iran's involvement anymore. It had become a shadow war by every definition except name. "What are our options?" asked the President's National Security Advisor. Langston didn't hesitate. "Retaliation, but surgical. We hit the depot, not the villages. Send a message without triggering a full-blown regional war." Outside the briefing, the gears of the military machine were already turning. A new strike package was being prepared. Stealth bombers, long-range cruise missiles, reconnaissance drones. The Houthis had made a mistake. And now, the hammer was coming down. But far from the war rooms and situation briefings, in the dirt alleys of western Yemen, A very different kind of preparation was underway. In a concealed bunker lit by a single flickering bulb, a Houthi field commander named Khalid al-Azhari reviewed intercepted communications alongside an Iranian advisor known only as Sardar. Khalid, barely 30, had risen through the rebel ranks with ruthless efficiency. His tactics were brutal, but effective. "You see?" Sardar said in accented Arabic. "Your men were underestimated. They sent their best jet, and you struck it down." Khalid said nothing. He wasn't convinced it was a victory. They downed a jet, yes, but the retaliation would be brutal, and soon. Still, the Iranians were pleased. That was all that mattered now. "We will move the remaining launchers tonight," Sardar said, "and this time you target their ships." The mention of U.S. naval vessels stirred something in Khalid, a mix of pride and fear. These weren't cargo freighters or oil tankers. These were floating fortresses, bristling with defenses. But orders were orders, and now he had a new goal: turn the Red Sea into a no-go zone for American power. On board the Eisenhower, Hawk returned to the flight deck the next morning. He wasn't grounded. The Navy didn't work that way. If you could fly, you flew. The sun was climbing higher. The sea glittered with sharp silver edges, and somewhere, not far off, the enemy was watching, waiting. Hawk looked out over the endless blue and narrowed his eyes. He didn't know what the next move would be, but he knew this much: they'd made a mistake attacking him, and next time he'd be ready. The ocean was calm, deceptively so. From the flight deck of the USS Eisenhower, it looked like glass, vast and serene, belying the tension that rippled beneath its surface. Lieutenant Commander Hawk stood alone near the launch catapult, helmet under one arm, eyes scanning the horizon. The salt air stung his face, but his thoughts were elsewhere. On the crash, on the silence before the missile struck, on the image of the smuggled Iranian launcher now seared into his memory. Inside the Combat Information Center, Admiral Raines studied live drone footage from western Yemen. The coordinates had led them to a second launcher convoy, buried under tarps and guarded by masked militants. There were no more doubts. Iran wasn't just supplying equipment. They were orchestrating the moves. The enemy wasn't just local anymore. "Confirm coordinates," he said into his headset. "Confirmed. 7 missile launchers, 3 transport trucks, no civilian signatures within a 5-kilometer radius," came the reply. Beside him, Lieutenant Patel adjusted her earpiece. "Sir, Ghost Squadron is airborne. They're 20 minutes out from the strike zone." Raines nodded. "Execute. And tell them, no mistakes." High above the desert, the B-2 Spirit, known as Ghost 1, glided silently. Its pilot, Major Jensen, had received the revised target data mid-flight. A second wave of strikes was greenlit. This time, it wasn't just retaliation, it was a warning. "Target locked. JDAMs ready," he radioed to command. "Final approach in T-minus 60 seconds." Back on the Eisenhower, Hawk suited up. He wasn't flying cover for this mission. He was part of the rapid response group, waiting in the wings in case the Houthis attempted to retaliate again. Every inch of his body was coiled tight, like a spring waiting to snap. Then, through the radio feed came the call: "Weapons away." 2,000-pound precision-guided bombs detached from the StealthBomber, slicing through the night air. 30 seconds later, they found their mark. The impact lit up the desert like a sunburst. The blast flattened the makeshift compound, ammunition trucks igniting in secondary explosions that could be seen from miles away. But even as cheers erupted from command stations, the Houthis moved. Within minutes, their response came, not from land, but from sea. A swarm of Iranian-made kamikaze drones launched from the Yemeni coastline, darting low across the Red Sea. Their destination, the Eisenhower and its escorts. On board the USS Winston Churchill, the Aegis defense system lit up. "Inbound bogies, multiple low altitude," shouted a radar tech. The bridge roared to life. Orders flew. Phalanx guns rotated. Surface-to-air missiles launched in rapid sequence. Tracer rounds lit the sky as the first wave of drones entered kill range. One exploded in mid-air. Another veered off course. But two managed to get within striking distance. The Eisenhower's CIWS systems engaged just in time. One drone was shredded to pieces by a wall of 20-millimeter rounds. The other clipped the stern of a nearby logistics vessel, causing a brief fire but no casualties. From the flight deck, Hawk watched it all unfold. His instincts screamed to launch, to get in the sky, to engage. But his orders were clear. Hold until the enemy escalates further. Down in the Situation Room, Admiral Raines received confirmation from CENTCOM. The drone strike was traced not to Houthi-controlled zones, but to a secret outpost just north of Al-Hudaydah, one believed to be operated jointly with Iranian Quds Force advisors. The war had changed again. "Sir," Patel said carefully, "we have signals intel showing encrypted comms between this outpost and Tehran." The Admiral didn't blink. "Then let's make it clear. We're not just hitting puppets. We're cutting strings." A second B-2 flight was prepped within the hour. This mission wouldn't just target weapons, it would dismantle the infrastructure behind them. Back in Yemen, Khalid al-Azhari received the news in stunned silence. His communications officer repeated the report. "The second site is gone, and they know it wasn't just us." His Iranian liaison, Sardar, paced angrily, speaking quickly into a satellite phone. He wasn't worried about Khalid or the Houthis. He was worried about exposure. The Americans weren't just retaliating. They were documenting everything, packaging it as proof. And once that proof reached the international stage, deniability would vanish. Khalid finally spoke. "We underestimated them." Sardar didn't respond. The next morning, Washington released satellite images and footage from surveillance drones to the UN Security Council. In high resolution, the world saw not only the wreckage of downed drones and missile platforms, but also crates marked with Iranian defense serial numbers and infrared footage of Quds Force personnel fleeing the site. Minutes after the bombs dropped, the headlines were swift. Iran exposed. U.S. links Houthi missile strike to Tehran. Diplomatic channels flooded with activity. NATO allies expressed support. Iran issued a weak denial that few believed. On the Eisenhower, Admiral Raines stood before his crew. "Let this be known. We do not seek war. But if war is brought to our doorstep, we will not just respond. We will reveal the truth behind every act of aggression." Hawk, now cleared for flight again, watched from the sidelines. He hadn't fired a shot since the crash, but he knew the time was coming. This was no longer a question of if, it was when, because beneath every missile launch and political statement, a message lingered. You may aim at the ghost in the sky, but if you miss, it will find you. And when it does, it won't just return fire, it will rewrite the rules.